Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. So, we're having a joint guest session for the free web development programming bootcamp and the free JavaScript programming bootcamp. We are both hanging out together. And today we're going to be talking to Parham. He is the engineering manager over at booking.com. So, doing all of the exciting things over there with letting you book hotels, but specializing in accessibility. Um, Parham, can we go ahead and introduce you? Oh, gosh, let's get rid of that title card and let's bring you on. Hello.
Hello. Hi. Nice to meet you all.
And you're going to be talking to us about a topic that's deadly serious today.
Let's see if I can do that with a serious face. Um, we all have to do accessibility because we have. Is this working?
It is very deadly serious.
Yes. Thank you.
And for me personally, I've been with my learners. So Ramon and I have separate courses we're teaching. I've just been threatening them to teach them that accessibility is important. You have to do accessibility or I'll get you. You have to do accessibility or I'll chase you for the rest of your life. But do you have some other reasons why developers and especially emerging developers should care about accessibility?
You mean even though they're gonna get killed?
I mean, I never said I was going to kill them. I always said that I'm
Oh,
going to
okay.
get them.
Okay. So
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
that's step
Keep
that's step two. Okay. Cool. Uh,
it's implied. It's
yeah.
implied.
Let's just pretend I didn't give them the spoiler, but
I
but
say I'd be very disappointed.
yeah. Yeah, but so the way I guess I try to explain it, and I'm kind of learning to do it better and better with more concisely without having this long disclaimer before it. But the idea is, I guess you can look at it in two different ways. One is the fact that you have 1 billion people with quite a lot of disposable income because they're usually older people. Um, who actually want to have access to the website you're building, in the case of people creating apps, to the apps that they're building and stuff like that. So if you actually care about money, there's an untapped market. There's even research done around the fact that it's an emerging market in most cases, the size of China. So you can either go for China
Oh,
or go for people with diverse needs. I guess do both. Why not?
yeah.
Um, and so there is the money part of it, and there's the more fun part of it, I guess, which is like if you are creating a product that you really feel like is going to um, make people's lives easier. If you're creating a service or providing a service that you think is going to make someone's life easier, then you're basically cutting some people out from this value that you're creating. And don't you want to create value for more people? I guess you
So
do.
if it's important enough to build the thing, it's important enough to make it accessible.
Yeah.
I'm going
And
to introduce if it's okay,
yeah,
I'm gonna kick me out of this and bring in somebody who's much nicer than I am. Oh, dang, it's Ramon. I'll let
oh
you 2 handle this.
no.
And as we I'm just hiding backstage threatening the learners. As we go, if anybody has any questions, I understand you wanted to do this as an interactive question and answer. So if folks have questions about, oh, what's it like as a screen reader user? Oh, what are the important things I should learn about accessibility? They could just hit you with them as we go. I mean, not actually hit you.
Yes. Please hit me. Well, I mean,
No
figuratively.
hitting, no hitting.
No.
See y'all in a bit.
Hey everybody, and thanks Jess for introducing me, and Parham as usual for being here. This makes me so happy, and as Jess said, and I really want to stress this for today, folks. Usually we've done Q&As after our sessions or presentations. I just want to say this is like Parham. Correct me if I'm wrong. This is a conversation, so please feel free to hop in with questions. Is that correct
Yeah.
for me to say?
Yes. Yes. So that's what I'm going for because, like, usually people have so many questions around accessibility, but either they're uncomfortable about asking them, or they don't have the people to ask them, or they don't realize how many questions they have until they get the opportunity to ask them. So this is basically me leaving the door open to say, as we're going along, if you have any questions, um, I guess, hit us up, and then Ramon can just interrupt me freely as I go through it.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. So please, Parham, do feel free to take it away.
Great. Okay. So the topics that I'm hoping I can cover, and I'm going to do this in a very short form so that you have time to ask questions, because usually there are a lot of questions. Um, I'm trying to kind of get you the 101 of accessibility so that you know what to Google for, basically. Um, and know when to do what, so that you can kind of go learn more offline. So this is not me trying to teach you everything in one, well, 15-minute or 1 hour or 1 hour and a half session. This is me kind of like giving you the first steps so that you can be confident to take the rest of the steps on your own offline. Um, okay, so the topics that I'm hoping I can cover today are uh, different forms of accessibility. And also, when it comes to web development, how do you take those into account? So, what are the uh, minimum requirements that you should kind of look at as you're kind of developing? And then the last part is testing for accessibility. So, you you know stuff, you've done the stuff, but can you check that the stuff is actually working? Um,
So we've got our first question already. If I'm sorry to interrupt you, Parham. So we got
oh, that's fine. I
Dominica
asked for it.
asking. We got Dominica asking two questions here. The first one is, yeah, Parham, how did you get to be so cool?
Oh, is that Jess again?
Nope, this is Dominica.
uh, how did I get? Well, I had a haircut. I also got a mic, and that's it, I guess. The rest of it, I think, happened very naturally, and I can't take much credit for it. It's just good genes.
Love it. Got another question from Dominica here. Why is A11Y named so weird?
So this goes down like this is mine, I guess, knowledge. From what I know, this actually goes back to Twitter days. Wait, did I just talk as if Twitter is already gone? Sorry. Um, this goes back to when you had to specify only 140 characters in Twitter, and people were trying to shorten a lot of things and also reduce chances of typos so that no one would know you can't spell accessibility or internationalization. Um, so what people did is they shortened these. So for example, accessibility became A11Y, and 11 is the number of characters between A and Y. So that at some point, if another word would end up with A and Y, they could kind of replace it with A13Y, and that would be a different word than A11Y, if that makes any sense. And
Yep.
then, for example, internationalization became I18N, and stuff like that. So you're basically cutting down 20 characters to 4, or I don't know, 13 characters into 4. So that's the intention.
That's really cool. And I've seen it done in other languages as well. In fact, in Spanish, for example, accesibilidad is called A11D.
Oh wow!
Yeah. And this is
Is
like
it?
a commonly held term.
Oh wow! Super cool. Yeah. So like it's. I try to go for the longer one because now Twitter actually goes for what is it, 280 unlimited, because you can do 1/infinity and then go for who knows how
Oh,
long.
yeah.
But I guess the thing is that accessibility as a word, there is, I feel like more people know it as opposed to if you were to just say A11Y.
Fabulous. Thank you. We've got a
Cool.
couple more questions, if I may.
Yeah.
Um, Jeff is asking, are icon fonts screen reader hostile?
Okay. I can take that in a bit. I think that I'm going to cover that. Short answer, yes.
Sounds good. Please go ahead.
Great. Okay. So what are the different kinds of accessibility? So there is a category of people who use a computer with a screen reader, which is me, for example. I'm completely blind. I was born completely blind, and I use a screen reader on my phone or on my laptop so that I can interact with the computer. And the way that works is it only reads text. So if you have colors that say something like uh, green is pass, red is fail, I will only get the words. So if your words are actually swapped out, I'm going to get the exactly the wrong value, I guess. And the other thing that screen readers don't tell people is things that you can kind of like uh, font weight, I guess that's what it's called, bold, italics, strike throughs, and stuff like that. And the best example of this is when you go to online stores and they say 399 and they stretch it out and they say 199. Um, if you don't do this in an accessible way, I'm going to just hear 399, 199, and I'm like, what is one the quantity? Is one the I guess difference? I have no clue what this means. And sometimes it's obvious, like this case that I just used as an example. Sometimes it's not. So if you're especially with lower numbers, if you get 9.2, now it's like, is this two pieces and €9 or £9 or $9, or is it nine pieces and $2 or €2 or stuff like that. So these two cases are the things that you should kind of watch out for, along with um, what we call interaction models. So you press space on a checkbox, you press enter on a form, and then it submits it and stuff like that. So all of these defaults that you kind of like do, that a screen reader user would have to do as well. These are the things that I kind of get to later when I talk about how to take care of accessibility. So that's number one. That's screen readers. I'm going to pause here and see if there's anything that anyone has asked.
All right, let's see. We got a couple questions. Let's see. Oh, got one from Jesslyn Rose on Twitch.
Who's that? That's weird.
Can I ask a question? Can you name and shame any common websites or platforms for being really rough to use as a screen reader user?
I'm going to skip my employer. Uh, I guess okay, so let me start with the good ones. Google usually has really good accessibility. So Gmail, Google Calendar, stuff like that, where keyboard works really well, but also accessibility works really well. And Google Docs and Google Sheets and stuff like that. Sites that don't really work so well that are really famous, Philips Hue, Sonos, what else can I think of? Spotify has good days and bad days. Yeah, I guess those. And these are like really big famous ones. There are a lot of websites that I use in my day-to-day life that are like web shops,
Right.
or like stuff that are local to the Netherlands, that you all wouldn't know the name of, but like the big ones usually are big enough that they have issues.
Gotcha. Thank you. Let's
Sure.
see. We got a couple more. Some questions are asking about animations in our toolbox, uh, accessibility checkers and dev tools. I get the feeling we're going to
Yes.
be addressing those later on, or did you want
Yeah.
to? Shall I ask them
Yeah.
now?
Yeah. I think now that you're telling me those categories exist, I can get into them a little bit deeper.
Cool. Let's do it.
Okay, so the other category of accessibility, I guess, ways of using your website is a keyboard. I think we all know this one. It's easy. It only has tab and shift tab. It only has enter and characters and stuff like that. And one really easy way to test the accessibility of a website is if you can check to see if you can get through all the interactions with only the keyboard. So if you have drags and drops, that's going to fail. If you have buttons that are not coded as buttons or are like spans or stuff like that, that then have on-click events attached to them, that they're all going to fail and stuff like that. So that's the, I guess, an easy one. There's also what we call switch input devices, which is devices that people with mobility issues use. And you might have seen this in videos where they use a mouth wand, which is basically something that you have in your mouth, and then you use your lips, and then it's different. You can use your tongue and stuff like that to navigate, click around, and stuff like that. Those are really cool. You can even type with some of them. It's pretty cool. Um, and these are also very similar to a keyboard. So if you can use it with a keyboard, you can be pretty sure that you can also use it with switch input devices. And if you can use a website with a screen reader with a keyboard, you can pretty much also use it with a screen reader, unless you're doing something weird, which I'll get into later. And then the last, I guess, mode of navigation or getting around your website is going to be voice navigation. So this is when you have like stuff like Dragon Naturally Speaking, where you can say, click on the address bar, type google.com, and then go to the search box and type cats, because Jess loves cats for some reason. Press enter, stuff like that, where you're actually instructing your computer to do stuff. And this is also very important because, for example, if you have a button that is not coded as a button, then the voice recognition system, um, the voice navigation software that person is using might actually not detect that they can click on it and stuff like that. So these are ways that different people navigate your website with. And as you can see, there are a lot of overlaps. So when we get into what you can do, you will hopefully get ways to be able to cover all of these without spending time testing all four of them in like one at a time. And now that I'm done with this part, I'm going to pause and say if there are any other questions.
Yeah, let's see. We've still got the ones about icon
Tooling.
fonts, tooling, and browser animations.
Cool. Okay, great.
But keep them coming, folks. Like, this is a conversation, remember.
Nice. So then, how can you actually make something accessible? So there are different ways for each of the four that I kind of mentioned before. So there's a keyboard, there's a voice navigation, there's a switch input, and there's the screen reader. For our intents and purposes, we can say keyboard and switch input are the same. And screen readers and voice navigation have a lot in common as well. So I'm going to kind of make this smaller so that we have a more manageable chunk to go through for our limited time today. The stuff that you can do for a keyboard, I think we all know about them. Those are pretty easy. You need to go through your website with tab and make sure that everything has a tab index. Well, everything that needs to have a tab index has a tab index. And normally, if you use normal HTML without doing anything strange behind the scenes, then this should be totally fine. HTML already takes care of a lot of the keyboard accessibility stuff for you. So all you need to do is to test it. And we'll kind of like get to the testing later at the last section. For screen readers and voice navigation in general, one thing that's very useful is the entire ARIA concept. ARIA is short for Accessible Rich Internet Applications. And this is basically a way for you to specify to a screen reader what type of thing they're dealing with. So let's say you have a button. For some reason, you have coded it as a span element. And then Jessica has come for you with a stick, I guess. You have survived that attack. and now you've learned, oh, okay, I need to make that accessible, but I don't want to make this into a button because of some reason. Either you maybe don't control the library that generates the buttons, or maybe some styling thing is kind of preventing you from turning a span into a button, or something that you might actually not want to do. Using ARIA, you can actually say, hey, screen reader, pretend like this is a button. And the way you specify that, for example, is through an attribute called role. I don't want to go into the details of ARIA today because I don't think we have the time for it. I just want to make sure that you're familiar with the concept so that you can go look at the Mozilla Development Network for some examples, look at the course that you're going to have as examples. You have probably got a couple of these already, and you will have more coming up. But if you search for ARIA examples as well, if you ever forget after these courses, you can always find a lot of examples on different websites that you can use. But so this is a button or a checkbox and stuff like that. We also have more complicated stuff like tree views or menus and menu bars and stuff like that are not HTML elements. And ARIA shines when it comes to these, because now you can say, oh, this span is actually a menu item that's called copy. And then if you press the right arrow, it gets activated. If you press enter, it gets activated and stuff like that. So that also helps you make, I guess, native application like experiences. And that's why it's called accessible rich internet applications as opposed to like websites or something like that, because usually the websites that are using ARIA are complicated websites. Like Google Docs uses ARIA a lot, Google Sheets uses ARIA, and if you can kind of imagine, those are like spreadsheet and kind of word processing apps, so they have very I guess diverse set of UI elements. So ARIA is kind of like used for that, and that helps both a screen reader and also by providing an accessible name for a lot of the elements. It also helps voice navigation, so that people who are using voice navigation to get around, they can also use your website. So TLDR of this section: read up on ARIA. If you see anything in the course that talks about things like role and ARIA labeled by and stuff like that, do pay attention to those so that you can kind of like see those as examples. And when it comes to a whole lot of other assistive technologies, just test it out with a keyboard. You should be able to get to every element that should be focusable with tab and shift tab, and be able to activate them with space and enter.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Jess for posting a link to the documentation on Mozilla Developer Network, or MDN, on ARIA. Check it out. And we got a couple questions. So first off, Tsukino Megami 20 is asking, are there some frameworks, are some frameworks better for accessibility than others, or do they need to handle them the same?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think I'm going to kind of merge that with the animation question, if that's okay.
Totally fine.
So, yay! So then there are a lot of frameworks that make web development easy, and the amount of accessibility in each of them varies per day. Because like there are people committing changes to them, and their knowledge of accessibility is all over the place. So unfortunately, there is not like a framework that I can say, if you use this one, you'll never have to worry about accessibility. So that's the sad news. And the same goes for animations in general. There are a lot of frameworks for doing animations of different kinds and sizes. There is no perfect framework. It is totally possible to do accessible animations, because you can actually communicate with a screen reader, give notice of what has changed. You can, like a slideshow is, for example, a good example of this. There are accessible slideshows that you can kind of Google for. I don't use slideshows often, so I'm not very up to date in that sense. But
Right.
but there are accessible ways to do this. It's just that not all frameworks have them. So in most cases, you might end up implementing a lot of the accessibility features. One way that I suggest, if you can actually pick what you work on, do spend 5 or 10 minutes just testing the accessibility of the framework that you're I guess building with. and we'll get to the testing section on how to do that, and I'll tell you like very short ways of doing this. But the idea is that if you have a choice, make sure that the choice is an accessible one, because that will save you a lot of time. I've seen people having to use, I think, Angular, and then having to specify by hand a tab index, a role for a button, and a label for that button and stuff like that, which is basically like you thought you would be saving lines of code by using Angular. It turns out now you have to specify all the accessibility information manually, which sucks. So do check the accessibility of the code that your framework generates, and then would be awesome if you don't pick the one that doesn't generate inaccessible stuff, because then I can use your website.
Terrific answer. Thank you, Parham. Let's see. Logan's got a related question to creating accessible websites. Logan writes, in a recent project, I created a button using input with type submit. It's not a button tag, but it's still keyboard selectable. Is this accessibility still, or should I always use a button tag?
Yeah, that's a great question. And often when you're using HTML, you can be pretty certain, unless you're doing something strange, that it already has all the accessibility features built in. So input type submit is very accessible, and thanks a lot for using it. Button itself is also very accessible. It's just that they have different connotations or different, I guess, what's the right word, context that they're used in. A submit button basically says, once you click me, a form gets submitted. But a button basically says anything can happen, and it depends on what event handler is attached to me. But when you click on me, things happen. And that's where accessible titles or names become very important, because, for example, if you have an icon, someone was talking about icon fonts, then that's horrible. I'm going to hear something in Chinese probably,
Oh
because
no.
that's what yeah, they use UTF characters, and my screen reader actually interprets that as Chinese or Japanese or whatever. So that's basically what you would do is specify a title that is very accessible.
Awesome. Good to know. Thank you. Let's see. Got a question here from Brett. Not fully related to what we've been talking about so far, but always good to ask a question. Parham, what is the best code editor in your professional opinion? Ramon, what do you think? Since you were asked first, Parham, I'll let you go ahead.
I'm kind of biased because I'm going for an accessible IDE.
Mhm.
And from that sense, for me, Emacs is the best, because it actually helps me write code inside the editor. So even if something is not accessible, I can write a few lines of Lisp, and then now I can tell Emacs what to announce when I do something. And with it being actually like a text editor, that's kind of like an HTML, where you can attach event handlers to different parts of the file and stuff like that. You can actually do a lot of useful things with Emacs. But I wonder, how about you? What's your opinion?
Well, I mean, I love that you mentioned Emacs, because my first answer was going to be Vim.
Yay!
um, I have used
We
Emacs
are
a
in
lot.
opposing factions on
But I think it's the best one for me, because it's the one that I know, it's the one that I'm used to. It's not one that I'm going to say is the best one in general, because again, the contexts differ so much in what we do.
Yeah.
For starting out with programming, like depending on how you're going to use it, I don't actually know how accessible, because I was going to say VS Code, but I don't
Yeah.
actually know how accessible it is. I was
VS
wondering.
Code, I've heard, is pretty good,
Yeah.
especially on Windows. So I think that's actually pretty good. They have an actual accessibility team, which no other
Oh
IDE
wow.
has.
Wow, that's good to know. Um, cool. Thank you. Thank you. That's a good question, Brett. Thank you. Let's see. We got one question on testing, which I'm going to save until we go into testing.
Can you tell me what it is? Then I can make sure to
Oh, sure.
cover.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. What
No
am I saying?
worries.
The question is testing with voiceover enough? This is a question from Jeff.
Yeah. Okay.
How can indie devs on a budget maximize testing? Also, any general tips beyond use semantic tags? So it's actually three questions in one.
Okay, I guess let me handle the last one first.
Sure.
So semantic tags. So semantic markup in general, I think you read about that a lot. That makes sense. The other thing is learn about ARIA, so that if there is something that a semantic tag doesn't cover, you get that covered by the ARIA tags. Um, and last of all, I think the as do as much testing as possible, not not in the like I don't mean spend all of your time testing and then you have no time developing stuff, but what I mean is once you learn how to do testing, it's going to take you 2 3 minutes to test a section of a website or an app. So it's going to be slow at first, but just like development, that's kind of slow for you if you're beginning. It's going to
Mhm.
get faster the better you get at the skill. So it would be great if you can kind of develop this skill as you go along, which is just like, you know what? Okay, let me put it this way. Imagine if someone asked me to build a website and I would build it with a screen reader. And then I would say, look, my website is really awesome. And then someone would look at my screen and they would say, what the hell is this? It doesn't make any sense to me. Uh, and imagine if I had made this website go live without any sort of testing with a modality that I don't use, which is visual, I guess cortex. I don't know, like my eyes. Um, and and so when you're putting a website or an app live without testing with a screen reader with a keyboard, maybe you don't use the keyboard that much, uh, or when you're not using any sort of um, I guess things that you don't usually do, then people who do use those technologies are going to run into barriers when they um, open your website. So whenever you're tempted, whether you should be testing or not, think of me building a website with my screen off. And I think that should be a good enough, clear enough picture for you to kind of like not stray too far into not testing anything. And I think so. This was question number 3 of the 3 questions. What I think there was a middle one that I forgot.
How can indie devs on a budget maximize testing?
Okay, okay, I'm gonna cover that in a bit. And then the first one was also
Is testing with voiceover enough?
okay, cool, great. Okay, so now that we have testing questions, let me jump into testing. So how can you do? So here's my aim. How can we do testing as fast as possible with as much efficiency as possible? Which is get the most obvious bugs out first. Someone asked about automated testing. Here's a problem with automated testing. We at Booking have money to spend around getting the best automated testing tool. So we've been around asking a lot of vendors about, what's how accurate would you say your accessibility testing tool is? And the highest number that we've got is 25%. And what that means is if you have 100 issues on your website, only 25 of them are going to be caught by this automated testing tool, which is, I mean, not bad. At least you're getting 25 of them caught. But the other side of this is that it's also going to show you a lot of false positives where it says, sorry, what is that? False negatives? I don't know. The, the thing where it says, oh, you have a lot, here's another issue, here's another issue, and then you spend time looking at those issues and then you realize, oh, the tool is wrong, I actually don't have any issues here. And it's just looking at the code, but now that I'm looking at the screen and stuff like that, um, it's totally fine. So my advice around automated testing tool in general is don't use any of them. They're very expensive. Companies maybe can buy them. Maybe it saves people's time who are already really well versed in accessibility, and they can kind of like look around and quickly discern which bug, which issue that the tool is kind of like flagging is a real issue or not, and stuff like that. But in most cases, it's not going to be as much of a time saver as we all think it's going to be. Um, so then what does that leave us? That leaves you, the human, who are I guess who's having the context to kind of decide for themselves whether something is an accessibility bug or not. So then how can we enable you to test with a very high efficiency but very quickly? Um, the way I suggest this, and I think I've kind of alluded to this earlier, is first of all, just begin with a keyboard. A keyboard is something that you can actually test with as you're developing. So maybe get into the habit of not using the mouse to get around your website. Um, and this is another really cool thing that happens as you're developing with the keyboard is that you start having these ideas about, holy crap, it takes me 20 tabs to get to this field. Is there a way that I can speed this up? And this is where the skip to links come into play, where you're like, um, imagine you have a page that's a search page and it has a search box, it has filters, it has search results. And now you can have a skip to search results, skip to filters, skip to search box or something like that. That helps people jump right into the relevant area, which means they press tab a lot less. And skip to links are another concept that you can look at to kind of figure out how they work. They're basically internal links if you've encountered them in your course so far. So stuff like that, where you actually are dogfooding your own website and figuring out what issues actually exist, but just by being a user. So number one for testing really quickly is the keyboard. And I'll pause before I get into the number two to see if Ramon has any questions.
Myself, I don't have any questions so far, but
No,
I
but
might have some from the audience. I'm just being silly. Sorry. Let's see. We've got one
why don't you
question.
have questions? Maybe you're not listening. No, just kidding.
Oh, Parham.
I thought I'd get back at you with that. You're a
That-
Vim user after all. I can't be too nice to you.
that's fair. That's fair. Let's see. We've got one question related to ARIA and one question about software for voice recognition.
Okay. We can
What do
take
you
both.
Let's take both. So I'll start with Sharonda's question. I have noticed in video meetings, voice recognition logs of what is said gets behind and isn't usually accurate. Is there a voice recognition software better than others on processing speed or accuracy?
I'm actually not the best authority on that because I don't use voice recognition. I think voice captioning in general is a thing that I see all of the I guess big companies like Zoom and Cisco WebEx looking into, and then there's also I've heard that there's also one available on Google Meets. So I'm not really sure. I'm sorry, but it's worth checking different platforms to see what actually works. One thing that's very um, well known is Otter. So that's OTTER. So that's Oscar Tango Tango Echo Romeo .ai. Uh, and I would look at platforms that use Otter AI. I think Zoom does it, but I'm not sure. And that might actually be pretty good. So if you're kind of not sure, maybe spend time using the demo versions of the Cisco WebEx and Google Meets and Zoom to kind of see for yourself how it actually works. That's how I would say to do it.
Cool. Thank you. And we've got a question from Jeff saying, thanks, Parham. Are the official ARIA recommendations the best source? I've been disappointed by the few ARIA books I've found.
Yeah, so the official recommendations are really good and pretty comprehensive, but they're kind of dry and kind of like license agreements. So
Wait, what does that
my
mean? Sorry.
a license agreement, as in like I read the words, but I don't get the words. Like,
Oh, yeah. Gotcha.
I guess I'll just agree. So, um, so like the way I would suggest you to kind of like handle this over time is um, get better at maybe start with the easier ones. If you can find any examples of stuff online, eventually it will help you understand the ARIA text better. So then you will get more familiar with state, type, and stuff like that. And then hopefully over time you kind of learn to read that document better. The first time I encountered that document as a screen reader user, even and a developer, it took me many tries to kind of like figure out what this means. Another way that I used to understand ARIA is to actually write something that I would then test with a screen reader, which is the number two way of testing that I suggest. Once you actually see an ARIA tag in action or you see it fail, you actually get to learn it in a much more experiential way. And then you retain that information better, you
Hmm.
understand it better, you can explain it to other people better. And I guess experiential learning is the best kind of learning that I've seen.
Oh, I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. Thank you. Um, I think that's the two questions we have so far. So
Awesome.
we
Okay.
can move on.
Nice. So the second way of testing that I suggest is with a screen reader, and you probably have one on your computer if you're using a Mac. I think someone already asked. I think it was Jeff who asked about VoiceOver. If you're on Mac, you already have VoiceOver. You
Yep.
can turn it on by pressing Command and F5, and then you can also turn it off with Command and F5. Um, and all you need to do is to learn the bare minimums of how to do testing with a screen reader on your computer. If you're on Mac, that's VoiceOver. If you're on Windows, I would suggest getting NVDA. So that's November, Victor, Delta, and Alpha. Um, and then you can basically uh, test the website with a screen reader on each platform that you're kind of using. And if I know that someone asked, hey, how can I spend, I guess, spend as little time testing as possible while also covering the most amount of issues? Um, there are screen reader specific, I guess, ways of testing that you can find online. um, I guess I don't think I have the time to get into each one for NVDA and VoiceOver here, but it's pretty easy to find information. You don't need to become a screen reader expert to learn how to test the accessibility of your website. All you need to do is to kind of get started on how to go up and down or to the next object or the previous object and how to click on things. And these are like two or three hotkeys. And then the rest of it, you can kind of just learn over time with things like how do you jump to the next heading? How about the previous heading or a button or a checkbox and stuff like that. And you can learn about those as you go. But the most important one is previous item, next item, click, and that's it. You can now do pretty much what a screen reader user would do the most. So TLDR of of the testing section is if you test with a keyboard, you're already 70-80% of the way there.
Cool.
The stuff that you are going to miss is things like uh, hey, there is an icon here, but there is no label for it. Or hey, there is like information conveyed in a color or font weight that's not accessible to a screen reader user. So like all the visual stuff. Um, then that's where you get in and test with a screen reader. And the way that you do that is you just figure out what's the hotkey for the previous item, what's the hotkey for the next item, or the hotkey to activate something, and then you just um, press those buttons, and then you kind of see what happens. So that's that. Another way that I suggest people test, because the numbers are actually higher, there are much more visually impaired people than blind people, is to just turn on Zoom. Just turn Zoom on to 170% and see what happens. Do your icons scale? What about when you do landscape on a phone? Do the controls get jumbled with each other and stuff like that? And this is basically all the issues, and you can kind of test this out for an entire section of a website in like 20 minutes or something like that. But that's because that's if you haven't actually spent testing as you develop. I imagine in the teams that we have at Booking that actually test as they develop, they don't spend any time testing. They just spread it across as they're developing. Just like when you refresh a page to see how it looks, you kind of press tab to see if you can reach the thing you just put in. You press the up and down arrow keys to see if NVDA reads it, and you increase your zoom to see if everything's working or not.
Cool. Thank you. I just want to take a moment, if I may, to tell folks that, for example, let's see. Logan says, this is all awesome info. Sharonda says, thank you, very helpful. Like, folks are very happy so far. So I'm very, very grateful.
Hey.
Parham, I'm told that if you wave, you can turn on your lights. Is that correct?
I don't have that now, but
Okay.
but I can just go and put the switch on one second.
I don't want to bother you, Parham.
No, it's better than not seeing my pretty face. No, just kidding.
Perfect. Thank you. Oh, you couldn't hear me.
This is something that I need to get used to with the days getting shorter.
Oh, yeah.
It's I wasn't sure when it's going to get dark enough so that I'm not visible anymore. So thanks for letting me know.
Well, that's all, Jess. I was so enthralled I didn't notice it was getting darker.
I wouldn't want you all to miss looking at my very handsome new haircut. So
it does look spectacular.
Thanks a lot. So I guess I'll just keep the light on all day, every day.
So we don't have any questions so far, but I just want to remind folks that this is an open conversation. Please, please, please send in your questions rather. And yeah, Parham, don't want to interrupt you. Please carry on with the next topic if you like.
Yeah, sure. So I don't want to overload folks with information. I think I would pause here and do a little bit of recap of what we covered, because I'm aware that I'm not using slides, so it might actually be a little bit hard to keep track of what I'm talking about. So let me do a little bit of a recap so that everyone will kind of get the confirmation that they've got everything as they're leaving. So the first thing that we covered is what are the different modalities that people I guess use your website with. And there's some people use keyboard, some people use a screen reader, some people use a voice navigation, and some people use switch input. And one thing that I also forgot to mention there at the time was Zoom, of course. It's a lot of people use Zoom and screen readers, maybe a little bit of both, or maybe purely just Zoom or something like that. So usually Zoom and screen readers go together. But when we get to the testing, I want everyone to kind of remember to do Zoom, because that's also very, very visual. You can already do that, but that also reveals a lot of the issues in JavaScript frameworks where they don't create icons or text that automatically scales. That also goes for CSS frameworks that are not done right. So that's also something to kind of look out for. So the second category of stuff that we talked about is how do you actually develop with accessibility in mind. And there we discussed just using semantic markup where you can, and if you can't, or if the control in question is more complicated, like a slideshow, like a menu, um, like when you have an application that actually works with a keyboard. For example, if you were to do a to-do app that has different columns and stuff, and you want to simulate dragging and dropping with a keyboard and stuff like that, then you would bring in Aria. And Aria is for accessible, rich internet applications, and it has a lot of different ways of annotating the type and the state of the different controls that you have. So those are really good for screen readers, but also for voice navigation in general. And then the third category of stuff that we talked about is how to test. Um, turn on the zoom, go to 170, 180%, see what happens. Press tab and shift tab and type into fields and see what happens. And turn on the screen reader, go to the previous item, next item, click on stuff and see what actually happens. And you're totally fine. So that's our table of contents. Or what is it? The index page when you bring it at the end of the book?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I
Yeah,
guess.
I guess so.
Yeah.
And yeah, and I'm hoping that if there is anything that I haven't covered that you want to know more about, that I'm going to give it like 5 minutes or so for everyone to ask questions before I guess we wrap up.
Thank you so much, Parham. We've actually had a couple questions come in, but yes, I want to take like I don't want to stretch you for time, Parham. We're so grateful that you're here with us to share your wisdom with us. But folks, if you've got a couple more questions, now's the time. Please bring them in, and I'm gonna start, if I may,
I feel
with
very wisdomful.
that's because you are. So we got a question from Tsukino Megami 20 asking, how can I advocate for more accessibility when joining a team that doesn't seem to be concerned about it?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, I think. So there are two ways that I suggest this, and this is coming from me, who has to sell an entire organization on accessibility.
Mhm.
We haven't got an accessibility team because someone thought it's necessary. We've got it because a collection of people thought it's worth doing, and they started a team and stuff like that. So I've had to do this for at least a year and a half now, being in this team. Um, the way I suggest you do it is by role modeling first. So when
Ooh,
you're creating something, when you're working on a feature, make sure that you're testing the accessibility of it and stuff like that. And then once you do that, you can tell stories of how um, something made your life easier or something made your user's life easier. So, for example, if you if you can gather stories of people using your website or and saying, wow, this was really easy to use with a keyboard and none of the other competitor websites had this and stuff like that, you can actually use that to showcase your work. And also,
ooh,
that will also help you get to higher seniority faster, because now you're doing something that the rest of the team isn't. So do showcase your work more, uh, and role model it, and then other people will follow just because it makes them feel nicer. Um,
yeah.
so yeah, capitalize on the fact that people all want to be helpful. I don't think anyone wakes up in the morning and says, you know what I'm going to do today? I'm going to prevent a whole bunch of people from using our website. Yay, let's go. so like, and I think everyone kind of wakes up saying or thinking, I want to make someone's life better, and do capitalize on that and show how your work is making people's lives better, and people will start craving that similar feeling that they get from seeing your work, and they're going to start doing it. So instead of telling people, I would say show them how it actually works and how you work, and then they will, if they find it useful, they will join. And if not, maybe you need to find a different company.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Got another one from Pramod here saying, if I have to test a website for accessibility, is it sufficient to test it at a double A level of the WCAG guidelines, or is testing at a triple A level recommended?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I think if you don't know this, it all ends up being a little bit too overwhelming. So most websites go for double A. Government websites in the UK, for example, they go for triple A.
Uh-huh.
But they're also different websites, so they can go for triple A. So some of the, if your website ends up being a little bit complicated, so let's say you have something like Trello, or you have something like I don't know, Jira, then your website is a little bit complicated, and in these cases, it might actually even end up being impossible for you to go for AAA. So what I would suggest is go for AA, unless you're working in a a company or an organization that has a legal obligation to go for AAA.
Got it. Thank you. It's completely relevant. Just a little anecdote. I always have to stop myself from saying WCAG when I read out WCAG. But like, I'm wondering if I may sneak in a question, Parham. Do you
I
have a
didn't
way
even
that
notice.
really?
Yeah.
I bit my tongue so hard. Okay, let's do one more question
Wait,
for
you
today.
had a
Oh, sorry.
question about
Oh,
WCAG?
oh yeah. No, just wondering if you also say WCAG.
I've heard people in our legal team say WCAG, and it just seems a little bit too much of an effort for
Mhm.
me, because I feel like my facial expression shifting into something that's not normal when I say WCAG. Uh, but yeah, I think I don't think there's a problem with saying WCAG, and I think a lot of people say WCAG.
Good to know. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
All right, let's do one more question from Khalid today. As an experienced VI developer slash programmer, what advice would you give to screen readers who want to major in computer science at university, especially sometimes it feels VI people needs to put double the required time in studying to be on par with the rest of students because of the nature of the major and some of the inaccessibility they would encounter. So
Yeah.
VI, just to clarify, is visually impaired, right?
Yes. Yes.
Gotcha.
And I'm kind of trying to figure out how to say this to not end on a sad, whiny note.
Mhm.
But I think I when growing up, no one really had this pep talk with me. So I think it's worth having a pep talk with whoever that you know is a visually impaired person and wants to get into programming, or if you are, I'm gonna just do it now. So here is how it goes. You're going to have to put in double the effort at your job. You're going to have to put in double the effort when you're getting around in society. You're going to have to put in double the effort whenever you're doing something new, because you have to understand it at a lot more depth than someone who can, I guess, use their sight more than you can. And I guess this is just a fact that gets a little bit easier to deal with once you accept it, because there's no other way to, I guess, look at this. Um, so when you do accept the fact that you're going to put in double the energy, it becomes a little bit less annoying when you have to go to school and talk to your professors to say, "Hey, the exam is not accessible, and I can't really take the exam, and that means I'm going to fail. Can you please help?" Or the same goes for your job when they are not giving you accessible tools to do your job with, and so on. So um, I the only advice that I have is basically accepting the fact that this is how life is, and then at some point, that's going to, I guess, give you the strength to persist when it gets really uh, tough. And I'm sorry to be a little bit, I guess, negative maybe, but I guess often people try to say um, that it's pretty easy, but I think that actually makes it hurt more, because now you feel like it should actually be pretty easy, and when that
Yeah.
doesn't really match with reality, you think it's something with you. Maybe you're doing something wrong, or maybe this is just happening to you and stuff like that. But the reality is that everyone with any sort of disability um, is having to put double the effort. And people without disabilities also have to put in double the effort in cases where you see people in minorities talking about stuff, in cases where you see people that were majorities before now feeling like they're minorities and all of that stuff. So like we all, as a part of the human condition, have this feeling that we need to put in double the effort. And it's, I guess, the only way that I have to console a person is to say it's not just you, it's basically everyone feels the same. So yeah, you have a lot of people near you that you can kind of ask for help and go um ask for energy from. So do use the people around you and your network. Wow, now I feel like I should go do like inspirational talks or crap. So
Parham, that was really helpful. Thank you. I want to take a moment because our viewers' words are going to be better than mine. Jane says, "Please don't be sorry. You are inspirational." V Prevail says, "It's so interesting and good to hear these perspectives." Logan says,
no.
"It's if that's not motivation to make things accessible, then I don't know what is." Jeff says,
Again.
"It's okay to be negative. How are we going to solve problems if we can't admit that they're problems?" Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah. Thank you. No, and thank you all. Thank you all for participating. Thank you, Parham, for answering questions. I'm gonna go ahead and invite Jess back in to sort of bookmark the end of this. So I'm gonna bring you back in. Here she is.
Hello.
Hello.
We need to have a Jess
And
music.
Since we started this talk about accessibility with me low key threatening the learners, I think it might be appropriate to end this with a low key threat, but not for learners. I really, really enjoyed you um, being really honest with Khalid and saying this isn't going to be as easy as it can, um, as it could be, or really as it should be for you to learn and get this done. This sort of redoubles my desire to say, oh, all of our learners and really all developers, period,
Yep.
and all educators need to make things as accessible as possible. Otherwise, Parham will come and find you.
And even though I'm blind, I might actually hit you.
Yeah.
And or
we
maybe
leave the
I'm
threats empty threats, Parham.
oh yeah. Maybe I hit the person next to you because I don't know who's who.
Nobody's going to hit anybody else, but you would be very disappointed if one of our learners or somebody watching us today made something amazing and then made it so that it wasn't accessible.
Yeah. There's a story that I tell people often about the flash delivery services like Gorillas. I don't know if you all who are watching have something similar in your area. There's so there's these kind of like services where you order something and then they bring it to your house really quickly. And then there was a moment where my wife, she's also completely blind. She wanted to drain pasta, and then the pot kind of slipped out of her hand, and it kind of half spilled on her, half spilled into the sink. So yeah, and then imagine how useful it would be to have something like flash delivery bring a uh, burn cream to your house so that you don't have to go out there in rainy weather unable to walk around because it's so rainy and windy that you don't hear anything,
Oh,
um, to kind of like um, make it possible for you to treat this, um, even though it's not a life-threatening situation, to treat the pain. That's actually not something that we had at our disposal at the time. We were lucky enough that a friend was heading to our house at the time, and Bita was cooking for her, and we just called her and said, "Hey, can you drop by the pharmacy and buy this?" But if there was no one coming to our house, this was basically wait until tomorrow where the weather is going to be better so that I can go out and then go and do it. And the entire night my wife would be basically unable to sleep. So
Oh.
if you're solving a problem, make sure you're solving it for more people who might actually need it more than your usual customers do.
That is a fantastic point, and I hope your fabulous wife is, because your wife is just as cool as you are.
Yeah. I think
I
she
like that
hasn't got the
pause.
I think. Well, I was gonna say she hasn't got that haircut yet, but but she's working on it.
She's somewhere in the house right now, a little bit mad. She doesn't know why.
Yes,
She'll learn.
exactly. I think she
Shall
knows why,
we?
and she's by the door, so no worries.
She's waiting. She's gonna get you. Um, as always, it is an absolute delight to have you come and speak to our course. And remember, everyone, build accessible websites and products or else.
Yep.
Parham, thank you so much. And Ramon and I will have to come and pester you for something chiller to cook than pasta the next
Yay.
time we overlap.
How about chili? Ha ha ha.
Yeah.
I love making chili.
So Ramon is just incredibly pure. He's just like it's like if he was a puppy was a human, isn't it?
Yes, I'm going to make chili for you, Ramon.
Ooh.
Aw.
I won't say no.
I'm gonna hang out because this is just gonna be too cute. And our learners don't need to see how cute y'all are. Everybody say bye.
Take care, everybody.
Bye.